Hey guys, so in this video we're not going to be changing anything with the website or how anything looks, but we're going to be optimizing this query right here. So this is the find listing query, and what we're doing is we're also fetching the owner. And now right now what's happening is we're just fetching for every single listing, we're doing a SQL statement to find the owner. This is inefficient for two reasons. The first off, you'll see it's the same owner across multiple listings, yet we're fetching the exact same dude every single time, and there's no point in doing that. And secondly, this scales really poorly. So if I have 100 listings, I'm now doing 100 SQL calls, and 100 is not even that much, right? So you can see this very quickly is not going to scale well. So that's why we're going to be optimizing this today. And so what we're going to use to optimize this is a library by Facebook called DataLoader. And now what DataLoader does is allows us to cache and batch these things. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell DataLoader, hey, I would like to load user with the ID that, and instead of basically doing a SQL call every time, what we're going to do is I'm going to tell DataLoader I would like to load the user with this ID, and the user with this ID, and the user with this ID. And then what DataLoader does is it's going to combine them all. It's going to get rid of duplicates. So it's going to see, alright, this guy wants this same user 6 times, so we'll just make one request and give it back to him. And then also, I added some other users here, so I have also this z@z.com. So what's going to happen is I'm going to say I would like to fetch z@z.com and this other user over here. And instead of doing it in 2 different requests, it's going to batch them together, and we're going to do one large SQL request where we fetch 2 users, or how many users we have. So we're going to look into how to actually implement this now with DataLoader, but that's the gist of what's going on there. So we're going to install this guy, and if we come over here to our console, come over to server, you can do yarn add DataLoader, and now it already comes with TypeScript definitions, so you don't have to do anything else. I already run that, I have it installed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder inside of source in the server. I'm going to call it loaders, and I'm going to create a loader called user loader, and here I'm going to say export const user loader. And now I'm going to return a function here. So because the user loader is caching, so when I make requests that I want to see user multiple times, it's going to cache that. So I'm not doing that fetch multiple times. I don't want it to cache between requests. And so to prevent it from caching between requests, we want to create a new data loader every single time. So I'm going to have a function that returns a data loader. So I'm now going to return data loader like that. So I'm going to say import as data loader from data loader. So now whenever I want to create a new data loader, I just call user loader like that, and this will return a new data loader. And now this easily allows me to create it whenever I want to. So what we're going to do is we're going to come on over here to start server, and on every request we're going to add it. So this context is created for the server every time a request comes in. So we're going to say user loader is equal to user loader, and we'll just call that. And now since I'm using user loader as a function, I think I'm just going to make this lowercase. So I'm going to lowercase that right there and lowercase it here. Alright, so every request we're going to create a new data loader object. And so what this data loader object is going to do is it's going to take in the IDs of the user, and then it's going to batch those together and fetch all of it for the user. So here we're going to specify the types for our data loader. So if I get rid of the angle brackets, I can hover and I can see the arguments I can give it. So kv, key value, so the key for our data loader is going to be an ID. So the ID of our user is a string, so I'm going to say string here. And then the thing that I want data loader to fetch are users. So that's our value. So now it doesn't like it because we don't have our batch function here. So I'm going to say const batch users, and I'm going to create a type definition for batch user. So what batch user here, his job is to take an array of whatever the key is. So in this case it's an array of strings, in our case an array of IDs. So we're going to say IDs, which is an array of strings, and then it's going to return a promise, and it's going to return a promise of values that match up to each ID. So in this case it's an array of users. So we're going to say array of users here, and we'll import that in. So now I'm going to set the type here, batch user, and for now I'm just going to return an empty array. Oops. And now we pass in batch users to our data loader. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to have IDs, and I don't have to set that there. So what ID is going to be is it's going to be an array. So it might have this here and this here as two parameters. So it might have whatever, and then the second one, and it could go on for as many IDs as we have. And this guy's job is to fetch all the users. So we're going to say const users, and this is going to be an asynchronous function. And we're going to say user.find by IDs. So there's already a handy function from typeorm for us, where we can pass in an array of IDs, and it's going to return an array of users. So I'll wait. So if I hover over, I can see this is an array of users. So some of you may think we can just directly pass users in here and then we're done. And that is not the case here, and the reason for that is we need to return the data in the same order that the IDs are given. So pretend this is numerical data for a second, because that's a little easier to look at. So let's say we have user 1 and user 2 with our IDs. So when we fetch the users, our data, there's no reason why this can't come back in a different order. So the data might come back, so this is users. Let's add a space there, where the ID of this guy is 2 and his name is Bob, and the ID is 1 and his name 1, and his name is Tom or whatever. And you need to make sure to return it in the same order that happens. That means if I return it like this, this is in the wrong order. DataLoader expects the thing to be returned, and the first value is going to have an ID of 1. In this case it does not. This guy matches up with this ID, this guy matches up with this ID, so we need to get it in the right order. So what we want to do is basically make sure it's returned in the same value, same order, and in my experience the easiest way to do this is just to create a map of the users. So I'm going to say const user map, and what this is going to be is it's going to be a key, and it's going to be string, and it's going to map to a user. So this is the type definition for this. If you haven't seen this before, I'm saying this object can have any key as long as it's a string, and then the value is going to be a user. So I'm going to store the ID as the key and then the object as a user. So I'm just going to say users.forEach, and then I'm going to map through the users. I'm going to say user map is equal to u.id is equal to u. So now I have a map right now that looks like this. So 1 will map to whoever that user is, and 2 will map to whoever user that is. So now what I can do is I can just say IDs.map, and then for every ID I just look up the data for it in the map we just created. So I say user map ID. So now what it'll do is this will return just an array of users, and it's going to be in the correct order, and that's pretty much all we have to do to set this up now. So I'm going to show you how to actually use this thing now in our resolver, and then I'll recap what this all is doing. So if we come over here to our module, and actually before we even do that, let's add the type definition. I think it's in not test utils. I forget where we have it. If I go to one of my types, we can find it that way. So it's this resolver map. So I'm going to click on that. So it's in types, GraphQL utils. So what I wanted to change is we have now a new thing on the context, and that's the user loader. Now I would like to get the type of the user loader. So here's a little trick you can use in TypeScript. So I don't want to get this thing, because if we come over here to start server, you'll see what I'm actually using here, what's actually in the context, is not user loader, but it's the return value of user loader. So I don't want to just say type of user loader here, because we're not storing a function in user loader, we're returning the type, the return value. So you can actually say return value of, and say type of user loader. Now I don't know if return value, return type, that's what it's called. So now what this is it's going to be the return value or return type of whatever this is. So it's like I just copied that. So if I hover over this function, you can see it's a function that returns DataLoader. So these two are equivalent. So that is going to be, so if the type is this, return type just grabs this part of the type. Or it's the same thing as me just saying that user loader is equal to this. This is a little complicated, but basically what I'm trying to do is get the correct type definition for this user loader, and this is how we do it. So if we come over to our resolver over here for our owner, now in this case I want to get the context and grab this user loader. I can say user loader.load, and we're going to load the user ID. And that's it. So we can test this out now and see if this even works before we go over what it's doing. And we'll let this refresh. So now when I call this, you'll notice the data didn't change. I got the exact same data back. But if we look at the code, or not the code, but the SQL it generated, you'll notice here's the select statement for listings, and here's the select statement for fetching the users. And now what it did for the users is it's fetching 2. So it's saying where users, where an ID is 1 or 2, and you can see here the parameters it's passing in. So it's fetching 2 users at once, because there's only 2 unique users here. Even though there are multiple users here, right, it was able to get all the data because there's only 2 unique users. So what DataLoader does is it fetches the data for those 2 unique users and displays, or grabs that back. So let's just recap right now what DataLoader is doing. So it kind of starts over here where I create an instance of it, and then I use that instance and I access it through the context of the resolver, and I'm saying user loader.load, and I'm loading the user ID. So I'm basically telling DataLoader, please find the user with this ID. That's basically what I'm saying right here. And then under the hood, how user loader is working is it takes all the things that were loaded, or all the IDs it wants us to find the user for, and it just calls this function here. So it calls this function, we fetch all the users in one SQL request. So this is one SQL call to get all users. And then here, this bit right here is just making sure we return the users in the correct order, because that's how DataLoader, the spec for it, works. And that's it. So that's how DataLoader works, and this is something I recommend adding to pretty much any query that you need to that is fetching way too much. So if you're making a SQL call every single time for every single item, that's a hint that you should start to use DataLoader for that, and you can add this pattern in. So that's it for this video, guys. That's how you can optimize that query, and I'll see you in the next video.